I'm just hoping that no other noises happen.
I have uh, my daughter, Zero, and then my son's here working on his schoolwork, so we'll see how that goes. I feel like every time I leave him, he has tech issues.
Oh man. And an hour and a half can seem like a lifetime to a child. Well, let's go ahead and get started. It is 10:45, so thank you everyone for being here today. I'm excited to have you. We're going to have a discussion-based session for the most part. I want to get your information and what you have done as far as working in rural counties yourself, and then being able to share that with everyone else. And we will share what we've been doing as well. We don't have all the answers, but I think that this is a good starting point to maybe get those going. I'm Josie Hurley. I'm the Family Strengthening Director. I've worked with family advocates for the last 6 years. Well, yes, as an employee for 6 years. I started as a volunteer a year before that. I had a friend in Casa, and she was visiting a little girl every other week during lunch break, and this little girl had no friends. She was quiet, wasn't doing very well in school, and I thought, okay, I could do that. I think that I could be a benefit in someone's life. And I was just a student in school and thought this will be some good experience as well. After I did that, I never left. I like family advocates a lot. I worked for Casa for 2 years, and I've worked in family strengthening for the last 4, and as the family strengthening director since May of last year. So it's been a little over a year, which is kind of exciting. I'll turn it over to Florina.
Hi, I'm Florina. I am the Family Strengthening Program Coordinator. I have been with Family Advocates for a year now, and my background was originally in biology. So I took a long, weird path. I was a biology major, and then I actually went into marketing because I kind of grew up in the grocery industry. But when I was at my last job, I helped start the philanthropy arm of that business, and so we just started gathering volunteers and going to events, and I just absolutely fell in love and loved kind of giving back to the community, and decided that I needed a change, and took this route. And I am passionate about teaching about ACEs and helping prevent child abuse, and I'm excited to be here today. Thanks.
All right, slide. So today's discussion, Florina.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlotte Waters, and I'm supposed to present Josie and Florina for our presentation today, and pretty much they've really said a lot of the stuff that I was supposed to say about each of them. So I don't know. I just got on here. So Josie is a family strengthening director at Family Advocates and has 6 years experience keeping children safe as a Casa, working with foster children and building strong families, strengthening groups and family advocates. Her social work education ignited her first passion of preventing child abuse and neglect, educating families and providing them with tools and techniques to improve family dynamics. And Florina, I caught the last of hers, and she is a family strengthening program manager at Family Advocates and is dedicated to ending child abuse in Idaho. She's a certified Hope Conquers ACEs trainer, and runs family strengthening parenting support groups at various locations here in Idaho too. She teaches parents and caregivers about long-term effects of ACEs and building the 5 protective factors to mitigate these effects. And so with that, I'd like to have them begin their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte.
You're welcome.
We're just going to go over today's discussion. A little bit that you're going to hear about is what Family Advocates is, our program Family Strengthening, a little bit Florina will go over ACEs and the 5 protective factors and hope. Just a good reminder from what Bob talked about yesterday. We'll have a discussion about rural communities, what Family Strengthening's learned, and maybe what we all can do to help. So I'm going to start with just introducing you. Hopefully you've heard of Family Advocates, and if you have, hang with me. I'm just going to let everyone know in case they haven't heard of us. We are, Family Advocates is the mother program of Casa, our court-appointed special advocates or guardian ad litem program. The word is interchangeable. It means the same thing. And then we have our Family Strengthening program. And I'll start with Casa first, just to give you a snapshot, and then we'll be talking about Family Strengthening the rest of the time that we're together. Casa, they work primarily with volunteers. They have over 100 volunteers, and they served 455 children this last year in the foster care system. These volunteers advocate for the foster children's needs to make sure that they're getting everything that they should be getting while in the care of the state. They continuously need volunteers, and so I'm just here to say, even though they served all 455 children that they were served, cases are still continuously coming in. They serve Elmore County, Ada County, Boise County, and Valley County. And so those are always areas that are needed. And then Family Strengthening on the other side, they are the foundation of what really Family Advocates started as. 2 families, the Hodgins and the Murphys, in 1980, actually it was in 1978, they saw that children are really better when they're with their biological parents, if the biological parents can get the tools and the education that they need to be good enough parents. As in the last workshop I went to the attachment one, and that's something that she kept saying, Janelle kept saying, and I absolutely agree. You really only have to be a good enough parent 30% of the time to have children who are secure. And so that's something that Family Strengthening has aimed to do for the last 42 years, and that we hope to continue to do as the future unfolds. So Florina's going to tell you a little bit more specifically what Family Strengthening is up to these days. And yeah, thanks.
So Family Strengthening became the prevention side, right? And after some staff training and lots of research and lots of different sources, including some information from BSU, retired teachers, psychiatrists, and with the Hope Conquers ACEs training that I received, we came back and took a look at the program, and it has developed into what it is now. And that includes those parenting support groups, case management, parent one-on-one coaching, resources, both concrete and just resources that are available out in the community as well, referrals, and the Hope Conquers ACEs presentations.
All right, so what we're hoping to begin now is we would like to go over what are we doing well with child abuse prevention and isolation in rural Idaho. And so let's start a group. I'd like 10 groups, Charlotte, if that's okay, 10 breakout rooms of 5 people, and we'll give us 5 minutes to talk about um, what services are available for child abuse prevention and keeping families from isolation, education from maybe the department of health and welfare, doctors, clinics, programs that are available, whether it's infant toddler program or Head Start, something like that. And then also think individually, what are some things that have been going well organizationally or as a community? So if Charlotte's ready to put us in those breakout rooms, then we can discuss some of that.
Oh, I think it's Jesse running the.
Get situated back into our main rooms. I hope that you all kind of designated somebody to share with the rest of the group. I would love to hear what you all discussed. I can start with our group. We had someone from, and I forgot names already. I'm so terrible with names. I'm so sorry. But we had someone from the Coeur d'Alene area and Kootenai area who she explained that seniors and the faith-based communities were really doing a great job keeping parents involved and from being isolated. And then also from Marsing, that they have a Marsing hub there, and the community schools really work together to ensure that they're giving services to families. So I thought that was really great that they were working with that. And then boys and girls clubs or recreation centers, anywhere where families can just kind of congregate and get to know each other a little bit. I'm going to go to Florina because I know she was in a different group.
Sorry, trying to read and unmute at the same time. Yeah, so we had a group, and Amanda mentioned that that small towns are really good about being resourceful, and she gave an example like because she works kind of in food insecurity. She talked about how they're good about having like farmers markets and making sure that food is accessible to families that need it. Pat Stevens, she mentioned that in Ontario and in that county in particular, while it's large, it's very rural, and they have kind of trouble getting getting needed necessities or getting things that are needed out across the county because it's so rural, and just trying to deal with that. And then Whitney also expressed the same, that while they have Pocatello, there are those smaller towns outside of that kind of really could use help. And so she's excited to hear what we have to say. Does anyone else want to share something they thought was that someone's doing well in rural prevention or in child abuse prevention in rural areas?
In our group, group 6, there were 2 of us that mentioned about community groups that would get together periodically, and then they would share their information. So there might be people who are there from CPS, and there might be people who are there from agencies who help to prevent abuse and to give parents help. But that's in 2 different communities. Those have slowed down since COVID, but they're going pretty strong there.
That's great. That's great. Are they similar to a multidisciplinary team? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I know in Ada County and Elmore County, they have those that the CPS and providers, doctors, police, they all get together and discuss cases that could potentially become
Yeah.
child protection cases.
Now, I'm familiar with I'm familiar with that, but these are more like just resources in the community. So it might vary, at least we're talking about Elmore County and Canyon County. And I know that, in Payette, they do that too. But they're more resources. And so it might vary. You're going to have people that are there every single month. And then there's some months where you see new faces. So.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds very similar to the United Way hub meetings, which are very helpful, I think, to service providers in general to know, okay, you provide education on parenting, you provide counseling, so yeah, and free financial education. So that's great. All right, we'll go to the next slide. And we'll tell you a little bit about what Family Strengthening has been doing to kind of mitigate some of the ACEs and the five protected ACEs and isolation. So we have trained all of our staff on ACEs and the five protective factors. And we've collected information on what families need the most in the counties that we do serve. So Family Strengthening serves Canyon County and Elmore County. I hope that someday we can serve more, and maybe that discussion can start today. But finding a way out of that isolation, help finding assistance and those concrete resources. So partnering with either the social workers that service that area or the school counselors, getting information from places that already do resources like certain churches, going with the food banks and finding what are the times of day that families are out and about that are able to come to parenting classes. And then as an agency, we began to share information about ACEs with families and recruiting families to come to our classes with those partnerships. Partnerships are super important going out into areas like that and having a representative. And like, for instance, for Family Strengthening, we have Florina who works and lives right now in Canyon County. And so she's able to go easily to a hub meeting or go and talk to the school. And in Elmore County as well, we haven't been as successful in Elmore County. And I think that part of that is not having a presence as an employee there. In the past, we have had an employee from Mountain Home, and it's been very helpful just to connect those school counselors and getting people to know about us and to really be able to feel comfortable to refer people to our parent groups. And so helping them to understand that we're here to help and to promote protective factors and give family those education without feeling like it's shameful or something that they shouldn't do is probably the biggest piece of that. And then lastly, implementing family activity days with our family groups to give them something fun to do outside of the normal class and to connect them. So that's what we've been up to.
And a lot of the work we do focuses on ACEs, building those five protective factors, and hope. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. If in the chat, or if you want to do a reaction, how many of you know on a scale of like 0 to 5 are comfortable with ACEs? 0 being nothing, I know nothing about ACEs. 5 being like, I've heard this a million times and could teach it. Let's see. What are you guys saying? Yeah, all right. I'm getting a lot of 5s. That's great. I'm glad to know that you guys all know about it. So this will be pretty quick then. So here is information from the CDC, right, talking about ACE, just showing kind of those ACEs that are currently, or the 10 ACE factors, right, and then some of the behavior and mental health issues that it could potentially lead to. And the main, there were 5 main findings there, just that their ACEs are surprisingly common, right? Even in the United Way 2020 community assessment that just came out, it states about a fifth of children in Idaho have experienced ACEs. If you guys haven't had a chance to read that assessment, I highly recommend it. And there's also a link between ACEs and then the adult onset of those chronic diseases, the mental illness, violence, or being a victim of violence. And the more childhood adversity that you have, then that likelihood increases. And the ACEs contribute to most of our health problems. And that these are all equally damaging, right? So if you have 4 or more, it could be like divorce, substance abuse, and mental illness, and emotional abuse, or it could be physical abuse, incarcerated relative. 4 different ones. They all kind of have that same outcome, right? The likelihood of these mental health issues and behavioral issues are the same. And I always love to show this next one because it shows that the environmental and the community factors at play. So this is from ACEs Connection. Again, another great resource. So if you have a chance to look into that, it's got a lot of great information, a lot of different resources in there. But I love that this shows that it's not just up to the family, but that there are things that we can do as a community as a whole to really kind of help support our families, and that there are things contributing to these families ACEs. And so if you look below on like underground there, under those roots, you see violence, poverty, lack of jobs, poor housing, historical trauma, substandard schools, structural racism. There's so much more at play than just what's occurring in the family. And I think that it's important that we begin to look at that as a whole.
So real quick, Florina, we had a question going back to Amanda Davis asked, how are you getting participation with COVID? Have you been doing these groups virtually with a reduced group size? And historically, we've had parent groups in different formats. We've had a parent group that is ongoing as a support group. We've had a 20-week participant group. We've had 8 weeks, twice a week, and we've had most currently a 12-week online group. And what we've noticed, and I was going to go over this a little bit later, and I'll go over it again, but participation with COVID, I believe, continues to increase. We know that we're missing a little bit of population when it comes to them not having technology or savviness, or even having the technology to do it. Taryn mentioned that Florina mentioned we've been doing some parent coaching just through texting. And so this can be really difficult keeping those families that need it the most connected, because we love having in-person groups, but we've decided to kind of go with the schools. And when the schools decide to be in person again, that's when we'll have groups in person again. And so even though the need has increased, we've decided to stay online for safety of everyone. It's hard to keep children wrangled and keep them safe, especially if they're between that 1 and 3 year mark, which is who we service a lot of the time. So next, I would just like to know what we aren't doing well in Idaho, and kind of considering some of those ACEs and how we might mitigate them later. What are maybe some common myths that you find that you come into contact with in your everyday work or just personal life? And again, thinking of personally, your organization and your community, and have that discussion. So Jessie, are you ready?
All right, Josie, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I just want to thank everyone for participating in those groups. I know it's not easy talking about what Idaho isn't doing right. I know we can't be perfect all the time. Um, and in our group, we talked about the lack of mental health and technology being huge right now with COVID, and a lot of families not having internet access. And even Alicia from Ontario said that the Relief Nursery is providing a hotspot for some of the families that don't have um, internet. And so that's a relief to some of their families. But it is difficult. And Wendy, she from Northern Idaho, or Marsing, I'm sorry, she mentioned that some of the providers in her organization could use, I think all of us providers at one point or another recognize that we could use some assistance ourselves. And so not knowing what mental health agency to go to can be difficult if even with the increase of telehealth, which has been going fairly well since COVID started, it can still be overwhelming.
And we had someone in the chat, Kathleen, said that our group discussed building trust, addressing cultural barriers, not enough providers, and connecting to partners over distances.
Does anyone else want to share some of the things that Idaho is struggling with right now?
So in our group, one of the things we talked about was the lack of services in the rural area that was taken away several years ago. We have so many of our people that are in the rural areas who they either can't drive, don't have a vehicle, or they don't have the gas money to drive for services.
Yeah, thank you. It is hard.
We also talked about the internet in the rural communities. A lot of these little towns, some families can't even afford it, but those that even can, the connection is still pretty spotty. And so I do know that you mentioned the library. I know that one of our school districts here, we're also going to try and help provide that resources. But I did mention that I work with children like at the birth to 3 range, and we have lots of children who are lacking, seeing their providers, not getting the care that they need during this whole COVID pandemic. So it's been really hard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
Yeah, we got a few comments in the chat. So Angie said that we discussed challenges of bringing parents together for social support in a very rural area, overcoming stigma of needing help when families feel they should just cowboy up.
Yeah.
Corey said school buildings and having positive relationships with parents in order for them to be accepting of help, especially when previous issues have been present. And Michelle said, we also talked about the nature of small communities, and sometimes there's a lack of confidentiality and or there's stigma of if you're getting help, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And then Cindy Richardson said, the spare the rod, spoil the child mentality here. Very few parenting classes for people to learn how to do it differently, and it doesn't help that all of the schools in the state still allow and encourage corporal punishment. And Amanda Davis said, we discussed participation barriers such as work, childcare, etc. We also talked about lack of commitment to programs, showing up for a couple and not continuing to participate. I think we see some of that as well, and some of the stuff that we do to address that is having groups at different times. Sometimes we'll have a group doing, and we rotate them out, but we'll have them like at lunchtime, and then we'll have one at like dinner time, so that we're kind of catching all of those folks, or trying to anyway. And then we do things like try to incentivize them coming to group by offering some of those resources, right? So those concrete resources that we have. Lack of participation is parents have to travel long distance for work and not able to commit fully to the program. Yeah, that's been a struggle for ours as well, right? Like if they can't, so that's why we continue to kind of change the schedule up, because if they can't make it to one, maybe they can make it to another. Um, but but yeah, we do have some folks like they work. Right now we have a parent, she works graveyard, and so it's a little hard to communicate with her. We have to do it right first thing in the morning, otherwise she's sleeping, and so she's not able to make this current our current group, but we're working to kind of see what we can do to get one scheduled for an earlier time for her.
And I think that's where this discussion of hope is so important, is bringing in hope to individuals and then to organizations that are, because it only takes one person who's passionate enough to bring in educators to educate the rest of the employees, or into a school that will fight hard enough to get the principal to allow it for the staff there. And so I'm going to have Florina talk about hope now and how we can instill some of that framework into our own community. And then we'll talk a little bit about how family strengthening does it by helping parents to recognize their own protective factors and how to build those up with their own children. So, Florina?
Yeah, so so much of what we do is related to the 5 protective factors and hope. I'm sure that if you're aware of ACEs, you're aware of the 5 protective factors, right? Because we don't ever talk about ACEs without talking about hope and the 5 protective factors. And so what we do is we just integrate that into everything that we do. So when we're talking, we're not just talking to the parents about social and emotional competence of children. We're working with them on doing that, on teaching them about social and emotional competence, right? And just kind of integrating it all the way around. Knowledge of parenting and child development. It's not just the one group that we talk about parenting or child development. We're talking about those parenting skills every time we meet. And we're just kind of always encouraging them and offering resources so that they know where to go when if they have a question about their child. Those positive social connections, I think that we're a really big part of that, because some of these families, they come to us and they don't have any, right? They've just moved, or the kids go to school, and so we are kind of that consistent point for them, and we work with them on helping build those positive social connections. And a lot of the time our families leave at the end of our group and they're exchanging information, right? They're exchanging phone numbers and stuff because they have a parent or family that understands what they're going through. And it's so nice to see them build those positive connections there in our group. And then concrete support in times of need. Again, we try to encourage parents and families to come by offering resources like diapers, wipes, school supplies, things that we get donated to. We offer to our parents, and then also offering resources like education on internet safety, or education on on BPA funding, or on WIC, or on food distribution, like places where they can find food, things of that nature. We're always trying to keep up to date on that stuff so that we can share any information that we have with our families, because while it might not apply to everyone in our group, it may apply to someone. And so we're just always sharing that information when we have it. And one thing that we did after COVID, like once COVID hit, right, we could no longer meet in person, so we decided to distribute our resources by having them delivered. So a couple of us volunteered to do delivery drives every Friday. So we opened it up to any family in need, because we saw that need growing. And so we just put out our phone number, have people call, ask them a couple of questions, and including their address, and then get those delivered every Friday, just dropping them off at their doorsteps using those social distance measures. And so that's been really effective. And then most of all, I think our biggest focus is on resilience and hope. I really like to share this picture because it's one of the activities from the Strong book. We ask our parents, what does resilience look like to you? And this is one of our drawings from one of our parents. And I just really think that it's beautiful. I know the spelling's not great, but that's okay. I think it's a really great picture. And really, we just always try to support our parents and view them through a strength-based lens, right? Instead of saying, what's wrong with you? We ask, what's happened to you? And I think it's so important for us to ask, how can we help? How can we support you? And we tell our parents right off the bat, like, the focus of this group is to give you support. Yes, we hope that you learn these small changes along the way that are going to make these big differences, but we are here to support you. So even after this group is over, please don't hesitate to call. We want them to feel like they are not on their own. And then most of all, we talk about HOPE, and that acronym stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences. It's so important to have those positive experiences. And, I think now that we're kind of looking at the solution of ACEs, how to mitigate those, we know that children having positive experiences is so important, because even if they've suffered some trauma, it is possible to help overcome that, with those positive experiences. I don't know if some of you sat in on Dr. Sege's talk yesterday, but he talked in depth about that, and it was great to hear that there really is, there's a lot of research and science behind the fact that it's important to have those positive experiences. And I think that we do our best to help with that, not just by having those parenting support groups and teaching those small changes, but also by doing things like holding events for families, like a family farm night we did a while back. And then also during group, we have one day where we have the parenting group and the kids go with a child coordinator, and then we do another day that's a family activity day where we just get together and we do things like play board games or do different like team building activities with the children. And so we can see those parents interacting with the kids and help just encourage them kind of make those right choices along the way. Josie?
All right. So thank you, Florina. I think that family strengthening, we really pride ourselves at getting to know our families and building that rapport before we start giving them education. Right from the get-go, when they call to enroll, we are asking them, what would you like to receive from our group? What is the main purpose that you came? And then from there, not only enrolling them in our group, but helping them to find individual family goals. And that could include finding an electrician because their outlets aren't working, or helping them get set up with Section 8 housing. We try to identify at least 3 individual goals that our case manager can check in with them after a few weeks of being in the group. And that's another thing, is the case manager is, I think, an integral part of the program, staying with them through that duration, checking in with them. I know Head Start is also very good at this with their family advocate, and their resilience advocate, I think, is a new employee that they have. Just checking in and giving them, doing the home visit even, which we don't do, but we're looking into doing in the future. And it really does help them to feel like they're a part of something, and helps to lessen some of that isolation. And so I wanted to just kind of go over that rural communities really are more impoverished than Ada gets the bad rap of being the oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher the phrase, the big state of Ada. And that we just come in and we tell everyone what to do, and that they're doing it wrong, and that's not our intention. We really want to just give people the tools that we've come up with over the last 4 years or so, and maybe help bring it to their community as well. So the United States Bureau, they have, I mean, you can see here that Elmore and Canyon County are higher in their poverty levels. And Alice, from United Way, their report of asset limited, income constrained, employed, that Elmore and County and Canyon County alone are, that we're about 10, they're about 10% higher. And Alice is really those people living paycheck to paycheck and don't have a lot of savings. They don't have a lot of assets to help them through these, like what we're going through right now, this pandemic of COVID. And so one thing happens and all of a sudden they spiral and they spiral down, and and unless they have a lot of that resilience already in them, then it might be harder for them to get back up on their feet. And so we really just want to help in that situation. And so one way that family strengthening ensures that we're actually doing what we're hoping to do is by data collection. We want to show people, especially funders, that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So beforehand, like I said, our families meet, whether it's on the phone, over a virtual meeting. I prefer to have these enrollments in person so that they can build the rapport even more, but it's been going okay on the phone. And that is really where we identify where those needs are. And then during group, we do an ACEs survey that just kind of tells us what we all know is if you have 4 or more of those ACEs, you're more likely to have depression. You're more likely to have those physical effects like lung cancer and heart disease. And so we would like to just kind of help mitigate those for their children and give them the tools that they need there. We do a resilience survey to find out where those strengths are and where they could boost those. And then we also have a Google Classroom that families go on to every week. And again, we know that this is technology limited. So this is for families that are able to get onto Google Classroom and fill out 3 questions that we have each week for them. And it's usually related to the topic. So what did they get from it? What is a story that they may have tried from the week before? And it's a way for us to keep attendance as well. And for families that don't have technology, we've printed them out and sent them to their houses, and then they can mail them back as well. And giving them that self-stamped envelopes so it's easy for them to give it back to us. And I think that's what's different about our parenting class than just a class that you go and sit down at and pay, because we really want it to be social connections and helping them to not just give them a handout, but a hand up of, if you come to these classes and you participate, then you get the resources, you get a gift card, and hopefully that motivates them to finish all of the classes. And then at the very end, we do a protective factors survey. We were doing the pre and post up until October of 2019, where we started doing the retrospective protective factor survey. And Taryn Yates through the Idaho Children's Trust Fund has kind of helped us through this to navigate if this has been a good fit for our program. And so far it has been a good fit. We like that families only have to fill out 1 survey at the end of the group. When we're in person, we can do it all together at the same time. For online group, they just go into that Google Classroom and fill it out, and then we have it. And so what we've noticed since October 2019 is, yes, the initial rating is mediocre. the great thing is there's an increase in every single one of these protective factors. Concrete needs, there is no pre, it's just what they have right now. So unfortunately, we don't know how much of an impact that we have there, but that it is just kind of average still. So we're hopeful that even if a family is only with us for 8 weeks, that they are getting something out of it. The blue part and the yellow, the blue before group is the before COVID. And so, is that right? Or am I talking about the next?
That's the next one.
That's the next slide. Thank you.
Yeah, go.
So the pre in the previous one was when they first started to when they graduated. And now this is the pre-COVID and now. So as you can see, the online groups, those are the pink. And the in-person groups, those are the blue. And so we have found that when we are able to meet in person, it's great. And we try to have these groups in different locations throughout our counties that we go to. In Canyon County, sometimes we're at the elementary school, sometimes we're at a church, sometimes we were supposed to be at the YMCA, but then COVID happened and we decided not to. So changing that up a little bit. And I love that our resiliency is pretty high, that increase of knowledge of resiliency, because that's our main goal with family strengthening, is to help build them up, build that confidence, because it's kind of like the life mask on an airplane. If you aren't feeling good about yourself as an individual, how can you feel good enough to build up your child? And so again, it's that self-care, it's that giving them the tools, or having them recognize that, yes, you may have been told over and over again that you're not a good parent. And I'm just talking about a parent, I'm not talking about you. I have a habit of doing that. But they may have been told, you're not a good parent, you've had your children taken away, and you should probably just give up. That is probably what they're telling themselves, but it's our job to give them little snippets of hope of, you are good enough. You came to this group. That shows us you're resilient. And you're talking during the online group, so you're building that social connection right now. And so we're real, like I said, real hopeful that we're actually doing what we're saying that we're doing. So next we are going to, I'm going to have Florina tell you a little bit more about what we've learned through our groups.
Yeah, so I think that we've come away with a lot while we've been out in groups, and then also with COVID. I think the biggest thing since the pandemic has been that people need their basic needs met first before we can even address anything else, before we start talking about the protective factors and ACEs and instilling hope. I think part of giving that hope and help building that resilience is helping them meet their basic needs, right? Which is why that distribution is so important. Those deliveries, it's always people, I think, are more inclined to participate and listen when you're kind of helping them get those needs met first. And I think a lot too that we've learned is that prevention isn't flashy. I think in the news there's always there's a lot of talk about what to do after something's happened, but it's so important to really kind of focus on prevention and getting that word out there. Also, we've had lots of families come who didn't want, who, like Josie said, just kind of need encouragement and support, because they come, they don't come because they feel like they're doing well. They come because they're struggling or because they've been court ordered. And we do our best to just always look at them with a positive lens. Even if they come in talking down to themselves, we work on things like we work on self-confidence because we feel like if you're helping build that confidence in that parent, then that's spilling over to the child, right? A happy parent is going to have a happy child. And so we really stress the importance of self-care and of pointing out how resilient they are, because no matter how bad things were before, they are here, right? They're here and they're participating, and what matters is what are you going to do now, right? And so we do a lot of work kind of helping build them up. And I do think that it is important also to kind of get out into those communities, those smaller communities, and get to know them, whether that's through the schools or the local like city council members, things of that nature. Because if they just know that you're available, then they will start to reach out when their communities are in need. Josie?
Okay, so we're going to go into our last breakout session. And this is just a brainstorm again of what can we do to improve our hope individually, professionally, and as a community. And then we'll come back and discuss. I almost feel bad that I talked so much in my own group that we didn't get to hear from everyone, but that's okay. Well, I do feel hopeful after speaking with at least my group that I think we all agreed that relationships are just important for ourselves, and knowing when to reach out to someone that we love for our own self-care, and then keeping those relationships with our community as well is really important. So I think that was our biggest takeaway of that, is just building those relationships and knowing what they're going through.
We talked about the importance of staying connected, especially during this time, right? When we're all staying at home. Kathleen said that our group talked about practitioners seeing cultural norms from a strength perspective.
I also heard the strength-based perspective in our group. I think that's pretty, it goes nicely with the hope framework.
Jessica says that our group talked about school and community partnerships.
Yeah, Wendy Tyler from YCAP also mentioned that having the schools and that partnership is really important, at least in Marsing, because they're using the community-based model that Ada has been using, and it is beneficial for keeping everyone in the loop.
Stephanie says that our group talked about making it financially possible for service providers to practice in rural communities, like offering financial incentives, payments for travel time, and mileage. And then let's see. Hope says we're going to transition in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then Michelle said, our group talked about how our families have been told no so many times that when we send them to resources, they will not follow through or assume they cannot get help. As a worker, we need to ensure that these families can qualify and actually obtain these resources and services. Yeah, I think that's true. The United Way, when they talk about the ALICE population, I think that's the biggest one that's struggling right now, right? They're employed, but they make just enough to barely get by, but not enough to qualify for a lot of those services. And that's just really a tough spot to be in. And so,
And
yeah.
it's so painful when you finally get that courage to ask for help because you've been struggling, and then you hear no. Yeah. It would make you never want to do it again. It's true. Yeah.
Before we go or open to questions, just a reminder, don't give up. The work you do is so important, and thank you so much for all that you do. I know that a lot of this is kind of like preaching to the choir, so we really do appreciate all that you do. And if there's any way that we can help, we are happy to do that. And there's our information if you'd like to contact us. Does anyone have any questions?
Before we close, I would like to remind everyone, do your evaluations for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
And what Florina said as well, we're happy to meet with anyone that would be interested in starting a parent group in their community. Just reach out and we'll help you through the steps. I felt like we didn't have a lot of time, so I wrapped it up, but thank you.